When I was 2 years old, when I was dedicated to the cause of Lucifer, I was at that point a seventh generation witch.
I was laying there, practically naked, and I had her hold me as if I was a baby. I couldn't talk. I couldn't open my eyes. I believe my eyes were rolled up back in my head.
There was evidence of human sacrifice on this site. One of my first questions I asked the guy, is there evidence of human sacrifice? Now looks around there, yes. We found a man with his fingers like who was a Richard Backer.
And it started to come down the stairs, and there were disgusting smells. And at that point, just basically said, do you know what they did to us? And that's when I fled that home.
But no, they would touch me. They would take pictures of my head if they wanted to communicate with me. Human sacrifice. Human sacrifice. Human sacrifice. Human sacrifice. Implants are real, okay? You know, we've got them on X-ray, we've got them on CAT scan, we've got them on the Gauss meter, which measures magnetic field 7.5. We've got them on an ultrasound machine. It's right there. It's hard, physical evidence, not delusionary.
And welcome to Conspirinormal, everybody. This is your host, Adam Sane, as always.
Your co-host, Luke.
Quote unquote co-host,
Oh, sorry,
right?
Luke Skyrider.
Yeah.
Luke,
Nobody wants to know your name.
Yeah.
Luke, beep.
That's my lame name. Yeah, don't use that one. Please.
And of course, producer Rob over
How's
here
it
on
going?
the ones and twos. And we have sitting in with us tonight, Jeff Heim from the Leisure Hour.
Hello, babe.
How's it going, Jeff?
Oh man, I'm sassy tonight.
I mean, it only feels like you were just on the show about 10 minutes ago, but I think it's really been a week, hasn't it? We got some weird missing time, alien abduction
I've started
stuff going
time
on
travel.
Here.
It's time travel underwear I'm wearing.
We just
Yes.
had bro sleepovers all week.
Yeah, that's what we did. Yeah, we've been in the same room.
It's a dude pile.
Recording podcasts and piling, all right? Well, tonight, guys, we have on a guest that I'm very excited about. And we are going to talk about this guest's film that he has made called Detestable. And this is a documentary about satanic ritual abuse. And this is a subject that I find very interesting. I must admit that I am kind of 50-50 on it myself, on kind of the some of the stories that are out there, whether it's real, whether it is not. And I'm hoping that our guest can kind of shine a light on that for us. And that is Mr. Tom Dunn. Tom, welcome to Conspirinormal. It's actually been a long time coming.
No kidding. Hey, thank you so much, Adam. Thank you guys for having me on. I am excited to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. You know, Tom, you were kind of in a way responsible for this happening, Conspirinormal, because I met you way back in 2009. I went to it was a conference with L.A. Marzulli, Russ Dizdar, and another guy, I think his name was Gary Ka.
Gary Ka.
Yeah. And I went to that, and that was in Mansfield, Ohio. I drove 7 hours to get there, stayed the 2 days of it. It was at a theater there in downtown Mansfield.
My hometown.
Exactly. Yep. And yeah, also famous for the big penitentiary that's there. That was the Shawshank Redemption, and is all the ghost shows. I met you there actually, and we kind of struck up a conversation when you asked where I was from. I said, drove up from Nashville. You said you used to live here, so we kind of got to talking then. And then a couple of years later, you actually came here to Nashville and put on the Last Days conference. And that was in 2011. That was actually a week before we had 2010. It was actually a year later. And that was a week before we had the massive flood here. And as a matter of fact, where you had that conference at that hotel was an area that was flooded at that time. And that was where I actually met a few people that I've had on the show since then, which would be Dr. Future, Tom Bionic, of course, a Future Quake, Guy Malone, he's been on the show. L.A. Marzulli, I already know. I've had him on. Chris Putnam was there. I've had him on. So you kind of were like the catalyst in the start of that, Tom. So I guess I should thank you for it.
That's really cool. I've heard that more than once. And matter of fact, there's somebody in the film that got connected with us because of a conference. So that's kind of neat how that happens. You don't know who you influence. So
yeah, actually I met, I think Chris White there too. Andrew Hoffman, I don't think we actually talked then, but I think I did briefly meet him at the time. So quite a few people that, later on became pretty instrumental. And of course, Dr. Future was very instrumental in helping me get this off the ground. I mean, I think he was an influence to us all with Future Quake. So did he ever have you on there on Future Quake?
No, I was never on Future Quake. The closest I came is they talked about my conference, and I thought that was pretty cool. So,
yeah.
And he spoke at the conference, which was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember he spoke about the I think the pharmakia, right? And we actually had him come on about 3 years ago, talking about that. And he's been on many times since then. So Mike's a real good friend of the show. But Tom, let's get into this documentary. This documentary is called Detestable. As I mentioned before, it is about satanic ritual abuse. And I kind of want to start off talking about how you came up with the idea to make this film, and, you know, also why the title Detestable. What does that mean? Okay.
Well, first of all, the title Detestable comes directly out of the book of Ezekiel, chapter 8, where God takes Ezekiel to show him what's going on in the temple in the middle of the night. And it's kind of really descriptive there, where he grabs Ezekiel by the hair and he's like, let me show you what's going on. There's some crazy stuff happening. They're doing human sacrifice. They're doing rituals and all kinds of stuff. And he said, you don't believe that? I'm going to show you something more detestable. Then he takes him to another place and he's like, dig a hole here, and he digs a hole and he opens a door. And the people who were worshiping God during the day, in the middle of the night, were doing all kinds of satanic rituals. So that I took the title from that scripture where it talks about, where it uses the word detestable. These are detestable things. So I thought it was fitting to put it on the modern day take, my film. But this film, actually, the idea to do it started a long time ago when I heard Russ Dizdar's podcast not long before I met you. And when I was at that conference there in Mansfield, was actually the second time that I met Russ.
Okay.
And was trying to connect with him. And even back then, I was trying to make a film. And my whole reason for contacting Russ the very first time, which was about 8 months before that conference, I said, hey, I want to make a movie about what you talk about. And my idea was, this is crazy stuff. This guy sounds very credible. He doesn't sound crazy. He's a preacher, and he's telling some of the craziest stories I've ever heard in my life, and they're scary. They scared me. And I'm like, this is nuts. I want to make a movie out of this because this is real, and it's going to scare people. And my whole thing was just the thrill. I wanted to be the one to do that. I didn't really have an interest in the survivors, the victims, the people behind it. The people behind it, I was kind of fearful of them. Mm-hmm. But I was this, the idea of the thrill of making the film and just kind of going out on the front lines and just doing investigative journalism, that sort of thing, kind of overrode that fear. I had a guy that I was working with, and I told him my idea, and he's like, no way. There's no way I'm going near that. That scares me too much. Anyway, so, I sent Russ an email. He's like, okay, if you want to make a movie out of this, research this. And I was like, okay. And I understood the concept, and I think most people can understand, okay, there are people out there that do weird stuff. They do rituals. They dress up in robes. Okay. This is a real thing that goes on. I think the average person would say that somewhere in the world, people are doing this. Okay. But for me, and I think for a lot of people, the hardest thing to come to terms with was the sophistication and the size of the network of the people that did this. So just as Russ instructed me to, I began doing a bunch of independent research. And I came across testimonies that lined up with the things that he said from people that did not know him, that never heard of him, and that didn't know each other. And I just kept seeing consistency, and just parallel testimonies from everywhere between people that had no ability to network and share their stories. And, it's just, we hear the same thing all over. So
what are some of the things that we are hearing? What is like some of the, because I am familiar with Russ, but some other people, like the guys in here, they may not be familiar with it. Some of the people in our audience may not be. Like, what are some of the claims? What are some of the patterns that we're seeing with this stuff?
I'll give you a few examples. Okay. One of the things that I hear all the time, that people say is, when they're a child and they're involved in satanic ritual abuse, somebody will take a knife and they'll put it in their hands and they will force them to cut a human or an animal. If it's a human, it's from the throat to the groin. I've heard that testimony so many times, again, from people that don't know each other, mm-hmm. and they give the same story. And it's the same thing. There's a lady out of Pennsylvania who she was called the Craigslist Killer a couple years ago, and I cannot remember her name right now, but she told a similar story where her and her husband got busted killing this guy. They did some kind of a dating thing on Craigslist, called him out. She met him in a car, and her husband was hiding in the back seat. They killed him. But when she got arrested, she told her backstory. She said when she was however many years old, maybe 12 or 13 years old, she was inducted into Satanism in Alaska, and they didn't use a knife there. They used a gun, and she wasn't able to do it. But they put the gun in her hands, and they put their hand on top of her hand, and they made her pull the trigger. So that's just, it's a similar story. But for me, her backstory of being involved in Satanism and being introduced to it is believable because of that. Because you have the same thing. You have a human sacrifice with a gun, a knife, but it's the same thing, putting the hand over top. We hear stories of people in robes. We hear stories of people saying, chants, drinking blood, sexual abuse in a ritual setting, forced to do all kinds of just weird stuff, pedophilia, crazy stuff like that. We hear that across the board from witnesses that have, been involved in this.
Right. So you have these commonalities, and you have these patterns that are happening from case to case.
Right.
So let's talk about what kind of like the definition of, well, first of all, ritual abuse, but then satanic ritual abuse. So how, what exactly are we talking about here with with the term SRA, satanic ritual abuse? Okay.
Ritual abuse, satanic ritual abuse. It is just what it sounds like. It's abuse of, most of the time sexual in nature, to where they are torturing somebody. Okay, let's take a child, who grew up in this in a generational satanic family. and they will tell stories. They were made to they were raped. They were made to have sex with older people, and they were made to drink blood. So it's abuse, it's trauma that is being inflicted upon them in the setting of a satanic ritual. Okay, now if you take the satanic part out, yes, there are other cults that may not fall under that, under the umbrella of Satanism, but it's, I mean, the devil, he doesn't care what he uses, as long as he gets to abuse somebody, as long as he gets to hurt somebody. You could, I mean, this term doesn't really exist, but you could call it voodoo ritual abuse. You call it whatever. It could be, I mean, it's if
Sure.
it doesn't fall, if it falls in ritual, our sexual abuse happens in quote unquote Christian churches also.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
but
so
this
we're-
is in the context of a satanic ritual where there's people in robes doing chants. They're sacrificing an animal or a human, drinking blood. It's abuse in that setting.
Okay. So when we're talking about these, we're talking about these abuse cases. Let's talk about some of like the link that we have. Well, okay. Are we talking about like defining terms here? So are we talking about kind of like, because what we see in popular culture most of the time is Satanists, especially like, they talk about the statue of Baphomet, these guys, Anton LaVey. Are we talking about them, or are we talking about something that is deeper, older than that? Maybe
Well,
even
no, yeah. When you have okay, let's talk about the Satanic Temple. Okay, these guys have been getting a lot of press in the last few years. They had a statue constructed of Baphomet with two children, there sitting on his lap or whatever. So this group here, they claim that they are LaVeyan type, atheistic Satanist. I don't even believe that really they're Satanists. I just think they're kind of troublemakers because they've just been kind of proven just to be a joke. But one of their part of their agenda is to say that actual satanic ritual abuse is not real and it's a myth. So that this is even in their writings. Okay. So, which is kind of bizarre because there hasn't really been an issue with this, in the public's eyes. It was debunked in the late 80s, early 90s, more the early 90s. So I don't know why you would come out so many years later and say that, hey, this stuff isn't real. But also part of their agenda is to go into places like you've seen this after school Satan.
Yeah.
And the whole reason is just they kind of just want to be troublemakers. Okay. I sincerely don't really think they even care about that, but they're just saying, okay, they want the religious freedoms to be gone because if it's okay for Christians to have an after school program, then why can't the Satanists? Okay. So, and then I think part of the idea is like, well, okay, we'll surrender our religious freedom if you stop doing that crazy stuff. But I don't know. I don't even take them seriously. They're a joke. I used to say I can't wait to meet them in public, but I don't even.
Well, I think a lot of them are more kind of like those guys are kind of more like they're more like internet trolls. That they're just kind of causing a problem or maybe causing an issue to be set forth and making it just, I really think sometimes with like there was this one that happened, just kind of going off on a tangent, but there was a guy that, was it Arizona? Or it might have been Florida. I don't know. There's been so many of them, but like this one guy went in and he wanted to do this like satanic chant to open this special session of the city council or something, and he had all these protesters going against them, against him about it. But I think that's really what he wanted to have happen, was these protesters to come and cause a scene and cause an issue. Whereas if the protesters had kind of just let it happen and gone away, it wouldn't have been, and just ignored him, it wouldn't have been an issue at all. So
exactly.
Yeah, I think you have the right attitude there with them, of saying that, like, just ignore it, and don't take them seriously. And if more people take them seriously, the more it's going to happen. That's going to go on. But so, like, these guys are more kind of like the LaVeyan Satanists, where they believe that, like, they're basically atheists, where they believe Satan is just kind of a symbol of what's dark in man or whatever they believe. But we're talking about something that is completely different. Yes.
We're talking about, and again, this is kind of covered in the film, where we talk about it going back even to the book of Ezekiel. We see, the dark practices that were going on there. And I mean, this is my take on it. Okay. Satan's plan A was to kill Jesus on the cross. That didn't work. I don't want to say that was plan A. I mean, he had a lot of plans to try to even stop that. But, we're talking the last 2,000 years to try and stop Jesus on the cross. That didn't work. Plan B is to what he's doing now, the end game, to try and put himself into, an exalted place, the Antichrist, all that stuff. He's been working on it for 2,000 years, and he has followers who are very secretive about what they're doing, and secrecy is their weapon.
Sure.
They would rather sacrifice, when I say sacrifice, throw somebody under the bus than be discovered. There's a case right here between my house and the theater where the conference was. There's a church almost exactly in the middle between those. And back in the mid-'90s, 2 teenage boys were convicted of molesting, I forget the exact number, but it's 20, 30 or more children, okay? Jeez. So these kids went, they went to prison. One of them is out now. But there's a story, when you live here and you read the newspapers and behind the scenes that the parents believe that there was a satanic cult. Kids from that church said things they had no way of knowing. They gave testimony, again, to people in robes, to devil chants, to seeing babies sacrificed. It's kind of a crazy thing. But the psychiatrist who worked with every one of these kids, I don't know if he's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but anyway, he testifies that he believes those kids' testimony. So, I mean, we can go on. That's just one example, but that's one that hits close to home for me. Again, how do these kids know or have testimony that match testimonies in Australia, that match testimonies in Chicago, that just, all over the place, in Canada and California? So, we're dealing with families. When we talk generational families or generational Satanism, these are the real deal. These are the ones that practice the human sacrifice. Your LaVeyan Satanists are not going to practice this. Okay. Right. Now you have a lot of, you also have what would be called what we would describe as experimenters. We used to call them dabblers, but we like the word experimenters better. And this is just some kid that might get a hold of a satanic Bible or a book of spells, or where they just kind of mix stuff up and they listen to a lot of dark music. That plays a role in this a lot. And they're like, man, I think there might be real power in this. They get involved in it. And, sometimes it starts off as what they think as innocent Wicca, and they get deeper and deeper. And they end up killing a bird or a hamster or something like that. And then it goes deeper, And, it can get dangerous. We take it all seriously. And, I mean, we even take people, that are similar to the Satanic Temple seriously, because they're messing with stuff that they don't know about or that they don't understand and they think is harmless. But, Anton LaVey did rituals, and he said he didn't believe in anything out there. What was he doing? Where was the source of the power to fulfill the rituals? He had to believe in something.
Yeah.
So,
of course, he justified it and said that it was like man needs ritual, and if even though he was an atheist, he still saw the need for it. That's how he justified it. But I totally see what you're saying there.
Mm-hmm.
I do. It's almost just like you have these different paths, but each one kind of leads to the same point eventually.
Right.
Is what you're saying there. Yeah. Let's talk about the kind of the influence of MK Ultra, mind control. How is that? And I know Russ talks about this a lot, but how is that influenced satanic ritual abuse? How is that a part of it?
Well, the connection there, I'll tell you this. When I started making this movie, I did not want to put anything about mind control in the film because I thought it was too much for the viewer. I thought we're going to cover this subject and we'll get into mind control in the second movie. That was the plan. And as I just began talking to people, I just found out that I could not separate these two subjects. I felt like it had to go in there. And I think the way it came out in the movie was good. But in the film, there is a lady named Kim who tells her story and tells the story. And if anybody watches the extended interviews and stuff like that, she tells the story of her mom. So the mind control, the connection that we see is military, government wanting to get, what word do I want to use? I would almost call it spiritual technology. Okay. And here you have generational satanic families doing rituals, subjecting children to trauma, and it causes splits in their mind. It's just like it's a natural defense mechanism that's built into it. You can only handle so much trauma as a child, then your mind splits, and you have separate personalities. It can be anywhere from 5 to 100 or more. So this is something that's been documented in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the Bible of psychiatrists. So it's called multiple personality disorder, MPD, but actually now it's called DID, dissociative identity disorder. So, this is a real thing. And what we see is governments wanting to get a hold of this ability to split personalities, to do mind control, to use it in warfare, to use it, in the military, to use it in espionage, to use it for spying. There's all kinds of, applications, for mind control. So we see kind of a connection there where people, either in the military cross over and get involved in the satanic, the occult side, or vice versa. I've heard many stories where the military or the government or the police find out about somebody who's involved in doing this stuff, and they offer them some kind of a plea deal, say, hey, we're not going to send you to prison or to jail. Just let us use your technology or let us use your subjects that you have split. So that's kind of the connection there without going into something really super, there's so many rabbit holes we could go down when we're talking about mind control and what they do and how they do it and the connections. But that's just basically it. In the film, Russ talks about the Nazi influence and how the Nazis were just pros at this and used this ability. And then obviously we inherited all of these scientists, who were involved in the occult, this dark stuff. They come over here and they have a big influence, and it was a Cold War on many different levels. We see we see the headlines in the newspapers, and Walter Cronkite and whoever else talking about, for years what's going on. But it's, it was an arms race when we're talking about people too, using them as spies and using mind control. That was a whole different level of arms race.
Do you think the possibility of right? There's so much of that I think has been unwritten as well. I mean, you are right about that. It just being like it is a mind control. Like that was almost the delving into the mind was just about as much of as big as a weapon as the atomic bomb in a way. But you think the possibility that there could be that this SRA satanic ritual abuse that it may be a part of the mind control process? In other words, of like wearing somebody down to make them believe that this is happening to them?
Sure. Again, so many different levels of classification, so many different sects, covens, that sort of thing. I mean, we hear all that. And yeah, I definitely think that plays a part.
Right. What is Kim's story that involves mind control and what happened to her?
Well, Kim, when you watch the film, wow, she has such a powerful story, and she reached out to us and heard we were doing the film and wanted to tell her story. And a lot of people reached out to us, but not everybody wanted to be in the film. And she was a person where she's like, you know what? I want to tell my story. I want to help other people. So I'll give you an example. This is not exactly about Kim, but it's about her mom. And I can't remember at this point if it's in the film or if it's in the extended interview, but she tells a story about her mom. This was after World War II, being used in mind control. And they would do things like put a hood over her, throw her in a van, and take her to this military facility where there were all these kids in there, and they would put guns in all the kids' hands, and they were facing another kid, and they told him to pull the trigger. Okay, so they do that the first time, and somebody doesn't want to pull the trigger. Somebody breaks down crying. They pull him out of the room within earshot. Then they beat him almost to death, and all the kids hear this kid getting beat. So then they come back in the room and they said, "Okay, now everybody pull the trigger." Okay, and according to the story, there was one bullet, okay, in all those guns, and it killed another kid. So.
Jeez.
And that's the idea of, just controlling these kids. I mean, this is horrible. I mean, who would even think this up to put it into a movie? I mean, I've never seen anything like this in a movie. So who would think this up to tell this story? So Kim, as she's growing older, and she has a lot of trauma from her mom, who has been through this exact scenario. So she finds out her mom has multiple personality, or her mom claims she has multiple personalities. So with everything that Kim's been through, she goes to see a counselor. And she's like, man, I'm mad at my mom. She says this. She says she's got MPD, and then she tells this story, and she's just making up excuses for how bad she treated me. So she told the counselor the story, and the counselor said, I don't think your mom's lying about that, because we've had many kids or many people come through these offices and tell that exact same story. So, that's an example of mind control. And again, there's more to that story, and there's more involved. And, Kim's grandfather, I don't want to mess telling this up. It's she does such a good job telling the story. But Kim's mom was forced to hammer kittens in a bag. Okay, I mean that's pretty graphic, but and she wouldn't do it. Okay, so what happened? Her dad put the hammer in her hand, and then put his hand over her hand and forced her to do this. Okay,
it's almost like a desensitization, desensitizing someone against death.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he was trying to force her to strangle it, and she couldn't do it. She would drop the kitten, And Kim has a story about what happened to her, with her rabbit that was given to her. So yeah, I mean, it's just crazy stuff that people have been through. It's like, man, you can't make this stuff up. But again, how was that used? Okay, this happened in Canada. This happened in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And since then, okay, I'm in a meeting with a police detective. This was a few months ago, and he begins telling me stories about a contact he has connected to another case, and the perpetrator in this case was from Calgary, Alberta, from a mind control facility up there. Okay, and this guy's never seen any part of my movie or any. I don't even think the movie was done at that time, and he's giving confirmation for something. He didn't give any specifics about what the facility was, but it was a mind control facility in that area of Canada. So, just a separate confirmation. Doesn't even know Kim, never heard of her. And, how did the Canadian military use that? I don't know. What were they up to? I don't know. I think they were doing a lot of experimentation, but they are also, who knows what they were used for.
We do know that Ewan Cameron, the doctor that did a lot of experiments, mind control experiments, that he was in Canada, I believe, in Montreal. So there is a link there in some of the MK Ultra literature with Canada and some Canadian universities and educational institutions with the CIA. So I can definitely see that. I did want to ask you about something with Kim. And I noticed this in the documentary. I believe that you start off with her, and she talks about how she had this rabbit, and the rabbit was a source of comfort to her. And then somebody sacrificed a rabbit right on top of her. And, she said that they then began to cut her. She said she had the scars to prove it. Did you ever get to see the scars?
She showed me the scar. It's an X on her chest. She did show me that. Yeah, it's right below her collarbone. Okay.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, because I was wondering about that, because that would lend veracity to her story.
Yes. Okay. Yes. She did. Yeah, she showed it to me, and it was the first time she told me that story. We were riding in the van, and that's the first time that I heard that. And she just, afterwards, she just kind of leaned over and just showed me under her, right under her collarbone where that X was. And I was like, wow, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, yeah. Yeah, her story was horrifying. The one that she talked about, this might have been in the special features, but she talked about how her mother would lock her in a room for days.
Yeah.
And being so thirsty that she had to drink perfume. I mean, if nothing, she experienced some serious neglect and some serious child abuse.
Right. And I don't know if I put this in the extras, but Russ Dizdar is the one that trained me. And one of the things he taught me was to verify. Okay. So I look for details, and I can't remember the name of the perfume, but she described it. And then I looked it up, and I found the kind of bottle that she was talking about that she drank. It was a little deer or a little doe.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And I looked it up, and not that she couldn't have known that, but I just look for stuff like that to, I think details are a sign of truth, The more details that you tell, it shows, that you have experience in being in that situation. So, yeah, I mean, no doubt that she was definitely traumatized by the neglect and the isolation that she went through.
Let's talk about some of the other stories that are in the video. And obviously we don't have time to get to all of them. And obviously you want people to view the video and or buy it. But, the Dr. Gregory Reed, was one of the most interesting stories in the book. I mean, in the movie. Sorry, we always talk about books on the show. But, his story, it just is extremely fascinating and horrifying. So let's kind of talk about his story and the kind of the things that he went through and some of the things that he showed you out in Southern California.
Yeah, Greg Reed's story. I love that guy. He's such a gentle spirit. He's such a good guy, and just went out of his way to help me to make this film.
And he has written a book about this, right?
Yeah. He wrote a book called Nobody's Angel, which is a powerful, powerful book. I highly recommend it. You can find it on Amazon. Really good book, and it's really easy to read. It's like right around 100 pages. You can definitely read it in a day. And the book is just so raw. I mean, he's just so transparent and honest in that book. I really recommend it. And of course, his whole testimony is in the film too, but the book, probably goes in a little bit more detail and background. But Greg Reed, he's actually not doesn't live in California now, but he met me back there, and he is doing ongoing research into his case, and he goes back every year to the sites that he remembers, to the places where he grew up, and just in his own research, he was able to find the house. I think he says in the film he's been coming back there every year since 1980 something, and like I said, he's doing ongoing research. So this is new stuff that's he's learning all the time, and he showed me even more stuff about the case, and showed me photographs and stuff like that. Of course, it's only a 2-hour film, and his part is only so many minutes long. So we couldn't put all the detail in there, but he has a lot of documentation to back up his story and just showing me, how he's continuing to research. But his story was when he was a kid, he went to this church, and a recruiter kind of came up and recruited him and befriended him to come, to get into this cult. And basically what they did, it was a birthday party, and they had some cake and punch, and they drugged Greg and they drugged his friend, and they put him in the back of a car, and he just remembers kind of being out of it, doesn't know how long he was driving. Next thing they know, they're in a ritual setting, and there are a couple of women there, and they're putting some kind of oil or something on Greg's friend, and they're preparing him for sacrifice. These guys are about between 9 and his friend. I can't remember how old Greg was at the time, but 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and his friend was maybe 13, 12 or 13. And here's the same story again. They put a knife in Greg's hand, and they put their hand over top of Greg, and they force him to kill his friend.
Mm.
So, I wonder about his story. Greg kind of talks about how he was chosen, about how his birthday was on a very specific ritual day, on a day of the wolf god Lupercus. That was his birthday, and he happened to have the same birthday as his grandparents' anniversary day. So it's just kind of interesting, and how cults and satanic cults and how numbers and numerology and dates mean so much to them, and they take this stuff very seriously. So, but he went on after he got healing, after he got out of all that, he went on to become an investigator, a counselor, and he has done a lot of ministry and youth and continues to do that now. So, and to write, I don't know, over 10 books. And I want to read every single one of them. I have a couple of them. He has a book called The Color of Pain, which is about boys who have been sexually abused.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just amazed at what he's been through and how together he has it. Because a lot of people that have been through this trauma, they're a wreck, obviously,
Right.
and they're struggling in all kinds of different ways. And Greg is just doing so good. It's kind of interesting because, you know, back in the day, Greg has been on all the shows. He was on Geraldo. He was on Montel Williams. He was just, you know, picked out to be on these, some of these, you know, I guess what you would call tabloid television now. But, you know, they were, when you go back and look at some of the stuff they covered, it was real stuff. And it was, you know, in my view, I go back and look at it, and I believe the research was good.
What were some of the things that he showed you? Like when you guys took, like in the special features, you go with him on a kind of like a road trip, and you go to some of the different places that he is, and he showed you a couple of things. Like he showed you the entrance to the Spawn movie ranch where Charles Manson used to hang out, and then also showed you a few other things too. So what kind of the things that he showed you, and what kind of was the link to his experiences?
The one place that he took me, and he goes into a lot more detail in his book about this place called the White House than he does in the film. But I had somebody contact me and really thank me for putting that in there because they had read his book and they always wanted to see what was he talking about. So we kind of drive up, you know, we're driving up this Southern California. It's outside of Los Angeles, mountains and rocks and, you know, everything everywhere. And he, you know, points over there to the White House. And it's been a while since I read his book, but this is a place where rituals, you know, took place. And he has memory of that. And he's met other people in his investigations afterwards and his work as speaking. So I think he was speaking maybe somewhere at one point, and someone came up to him and gave him information and memories about that house that no one else would know unless they had been there. You know, and it kind of gave him confirmation. You know, it's been a while since I read his book, and again, that the White House that's pointed out in the, I guess I should say, when you buy the film, you have the option to get the extra interviews. I couldn't fit everything into the film,
Sure.
so I made another DVD that you can buy. It has over 2 hours of outtakes and extended interviews and, you know, just more interviews that wouldn't fit into the film. So this is one of the things that we put in there, and I just kind of wanted to show people that because I thought it was relevant. But so, yeah, that, you know, that's something there that has a connection. And if you want to know about that house, you can see it in that part of the film, but you can read more about it in the book.
I want to give before we go on to some of the other stories, I want to get to Guy Kalberg's story because I think that's definitely a very interesting and, well, emotionally brutal one. But I wanted to give these guys a chance. And Rob has seen the video. Jeff, do any of you guys want to ask any questions about any of this?
I kind of do, but I don't know how to form it. So what part of the Bible does the whole Satan, where do most of these like satanic cults, where do they derive their like history of Satan from? What part of the Bible is it a common part, or is it just basically we're just calling it Satanism? You know what I mean? Like what kind of historical, I don't know, what parts of the Bible do they sort of bring this, this cult thing from?
Well, okay. We can look at passages like Ezekiel chapter 8. We can look at the book of Kings, and I'm not going to be able to give you the exact chapter and verse.
No, just in your estimation.
Well, so when you're looking at things like Elijah on Mount Carmel, okay,
Mm-hmm.
And he and the prophets of Baal, okay, obviously the terminology is not Satanist, and I don't think that they were Satanists. They believed that they were worshiping Baal, and they were cutting themselves, and they were doing sex rituals and all kinds of things like this. Okay. Also, okay, there's an example of, of cutting, of bloodletting, which, the demonic presence loves. And the whole idea behind the sacrifice and the torture of somebody is, letting human blood hit the air. So also in the book of Kings, you have the Moabite king who sacrificed his own son to gain demonic power to overcome the Israelites in battle. I don't know if that's First or Second Kings, but if somebody wants to check this, type in a search, Moabite king sacrifices his son. He threw his son up against the wall. And then his army was empowered, okay, with, I believe, demonic power, okay, just kind of went into a frenzy and, fought more fiercely. So, okay, so these are examples of the practices, but, where do we get the name from? Where do we get, how do we call them Satanists? Because they're not called that in the Bible, okay? Personally, where I get it from, and, if you talk to my producer, if you talk to Russ, you'll get different answers. And they're better at explaining this stuff than I am. That's why I had them in the film and not me. But I'll tell you where I take it from, okay? I think of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, okay, where it talks about a secret power of lawlessness, okay? And the power means supernatural operative force. Kind of what I was bringing up a little bit ago was, this is Satan's plan B, was to have these followers, have these people, these infiltrators, this underground network who, I'm a Christian, we're believers. Any of us who are believers are out in the open. We have nothing to hide. The Satanists are not that way. What they do is secret, what they do is evil, and they don't want to be exposed. So for generations, they have been underground, but I believe that this is what we're seeing when we're hearing about armies. The Antichrist, when he shows up, he's not going to say, okay, I need to get a military. He's already going to have it in place. So I
don't want this to sound condescending at all, but
no.
Essentially all of this has stemmed from 2 Bible verses. I mean, is it sort of, I see that it's a philosophy of lawlessness. I get that, but
right,
it's
right.
all of this has come about because of 2 Bible verses where they don't even mention Satan. Or they call it Satan.
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I mean, the Antichrist is talked about all throughout the, from the book of Daniel, and the book of Revelation, and, 1 John, and, Jesus talked about it, in the Gospels and Thessalonians. So I look at these people as the armies of Antichrist.
Does Jesus mention, say, this is Satan? Or how does Jesus describe it? And I'm not as well versed in the Bible as you are, obviously.
Oh, well, and I'm not a theologian by any means. I have all kinds of crutches I use to help me through. And then on top of all that, my memory is horrible.
Mine too.
So I'm constantly forgetting things that I know and then going back and looking it up. So, but I guess what I would say to you, that these people, okay, the witnesses that have come forward, that have the whistleblowers and those who have survived and come out of here have testified that these people are Luciferian. They worship Satan. They, and they have a plan to usher in the Antichrist, which goes along, with what we know from Scripture.
That was Second Kings, by the way, the Moabite sacrifice.
So, yeah, I mean, and this is not saying that Moabite king was a Satanist, okay? But, again, a lot of these practices are ancient, and they go back to those times, okay? I'm not a theologian. Russ Dizdar, a lot of other people could answer, these questions a lot better than I. I'm a filmmaker. So, but, I believe the connection is armies of Antichrist. These people are obviously practicing something that is completely contrary to, I don't want to say opposite of being a Christian, but obviously they hate God. They want to blaspheme God. They want to, completely come against him, and they believe that what they're doing is good. They believe Lucifer is good. They believe God is evil. So, the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers. So I don't think by any means, just using the examples, of the similar practices, that it is, that this is, what we're talking about. Personally, I think a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon is blinded by Satan, but I would never call them Satanist,
Interesting.
But
sure, I could see the distinction there. I can see the distinction. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I want to make sure that I answer his question, because I don't want it to look as if I'm trying to avert anything. But if I don't know anything, it doesn't mean there's not an answer. But it's a very good chance I don't have the answer to what you're asking. I think it's a really good question. But again, I'm not a theologian. I believe these are the armies of Antichrist. And does it say in the Bible that there's going to be underground Satanists who sacrifice people who do this, and they're going to call themselves Satanists? No, that's not spelled out in a verse in the Bible. But we can see what, just look at Ezekiel. We can see, what those who are, serving darkness are doing.
Let's talk about Guy Kalberg. Let's talk about his experience. This is something that is, I got to tell you, when I watched it, I mean, it was hard. It was hard to get through. It was hard to listen to. I think more than any of the other experiences. What happened to him? And, well, I guess how did you come across him? And then also what happened to him?
We met Guy Kalberg in Columbus, Ohio, at a conference, and he had been through a very traumatic experience, which he tells this story in the film. I think it's been about 20 years ago now, and that was the reason why he drove all the way from Oregon to Columbus, Ohio, to meet us, because he was haunted by what had happened, and he told people. He told very few people, but because he was ashamed of what happened, he was, it was just traumatizing to him, and some of the people that he told didn't believe him. So he found Russ Dizdar, and he knew this was his field of work. So he came across the United States. It'll be 2 years ago next month that he came out. And Russ was counseling with someone else. So I was standing up there, and one of the team members introduced me to Guy and said, "Hey, this is Guy. He came from Oregon." And then Guy told me his story, and then he began to break down crying. And so I was like, wow, this is the real deal. I could just tell that this guy had really witnessed something. And so then we worked with Russ, and Guy got some deliverance and went through a freedom encounter there, and a lot of counseling. And so I asked Guy, I said, "Hey, can I film your testimony so I can just kind of have a record of that? And one day I want to make a film I want to make a film about this." And he said, "Yeah, I'll tell my testimony." He said, "I don't care who you tell." And he the next day, actually, we videotaped the testimony, but the story is this. And when you're watching the movie, it's a little bit complicated, but Guy got pulled into this because of his involvement in drugs and using drugs. So he was hanging out with people who used drugs, and these same people were involved in a satanic coven. He was using drugs, and again, he tells this story. In the film, when you watch the film, he remembers coming back into this apartment, and they threw him in the shower, and he couldn't figure out. He's like, man, why am I bleeding? What is all this blood, doing? He's like, the water was pink and it was running down. He said they took him out of the shower and they threw him into a room and locked the door. And he was just kind of freaked out. He's like, I don't know what's going on. And he busted out of that room and ran down the road and hid in a church van. And then he was arrested the next morning because he broke into that church van. He broke the window out of it. But so then when he was in jail, he remembered what happened to him, and he tells the story in the film, and then he goes even some more detail, because you can kind of hear me asking him more questions about what happened. But he was taken to a place where he saw two kids on like a stone slab, and they were torturing these kids. They were sexually abusing these kids and doing all kinds of horrific things to these kids. And they did horrific things to Guy also. And then he remembers them screaming. And of course, the whole time he's telling this story, he's crying and he feels horrible because he didn't do anything to save these kids. Mm-hmm. So eventually they killed the kids. And they take him to a room, and the kids are laying there. And they said, if you ever tell anybody about this, we're going to do this to you. We're going to do this to your family. So, and then they did more horrific things to him. And then, that's what happened, before that time, that he found himself back in that apartment, getting that shower, and he was being washed off, and he explains in the film, he said there were two girls, that put me in the shower and were washing me off, and he's like, why am I bleeding? They said, it's not your blood. It's not your blood. But I mean, I heard him tell that story so many times, and every single time he gets emotional, he breaks down crying, and he feels horrible about what happened. So, again, I have absolutely no doubt that this guy experienced these things, and it's a crazy story, but it's one of hundreds that we've heard. Hundreds that I've heard, but yeah.
Right. He also mentions that there were military guys present at the ritual.
Yeah, he did. He does say that, and that might be in the extended interviews. I think he might mention that. So, and I can't remember the details on that, but yeah, he did say that maybe there was some kind of security there, or some guys in, that had tactical gear or whatever there, maybe to keep him secure. But when I went out there to Oregon, he took me to the place where that stuff happened. He took me to the church where the van was, and we tried to find the police officer that arrested him. We couldn't find him that day. But we went to all those different places, those locations where it happened, except for the actual ritual site, because he doesn't know where it was. He thinks it was up on that mountain there that was by that town. It happened in Newburgh, Washington. So.
And did he also say, I think this is in the special features as well, did he also say that he felt like he was at some kind of estate?
Yeah,
some kind of house,
like it was some kind of a mansion or something. You know what's interesting?
Yeah,
is when I was flying out to Oregon to interview Guy, I barely made the plane. My plane was late getting to North Carolina, and I ran through the airport, with a backpack full of camera gear, my clothes in the other arm. And I'm a runner, man, and I barely made that plane. And I mean, I'm not kidding. I got on the plane, and they shut the door right behind me.
Wow.
That's not an exaggeration. And I found my seat, and I sat down next to a guy, and this guy started talking to me, talking my ear off. Super nice guy, blankety blank blank, all this stuff. And then he found out I was a Christian. He's like, "Oh, you're a Christian." And then he was like, "Well, man, that's so weird that you're a Christian and that I'm sitting next to you, because I've had all these Christians witnessing to me, all the these last few weeks." And he pulls out this book. It's like, I can't remember what it was. It was like The Case for Christ or something. I can't remember what it was. So, and then he's like, "Well, so why are you going to Oregon?" Then I told him, I said, "I'm making a movie." I said, "I'm going to this place south of Portland. And I told him where it was. He was like, "You've got to be kidding me." He's like, "That's where I'm from." And then I told him, some of the details. I told him that the film was about Satanism. And then he gave me details about a place that Guy had separately told me about that was up in the mountains. That was a place that it was just, as far as this guy is concerned, he didn't know if it was true or if it was rumors, but they had, as teenage kids out, doing whatever, drinking, they, you just kind of dare each other to go to a place that's rumored to be. And he gave similar testimony to Guy about, certain locations up on that exact same mountain. What is that? Oh, it's called Bald Peak Mountain. And he said the exact same name. And some of the one of these houses was called the Cat House, and the reason they called it the Cat House because I guess there was a bunch of dead cats hanging up around the place, and that he told me that separately from what Guy had told me. So they were both from the exact same place. Well, Guy wasn't from there, but this guy was from there. But they, Guy had a connection there. So anyway.
Let's talk about some of the cases that you do kind of mention somewhat in the film. And I want to talk about specifically about the Mick Martin preschool case. What are your views on that?
My view on the Mick Martin preschool case is it's 100% legitimate. I don't know as much about it as somebody like Greg Reed, but I asked him about it, and again, I can't remember everything that he said. But here's the story of kids giving testimony. Same thing that kids give a testimony in my town. Okay, is it possible? And I'm not referring to Mick Martin at this point, but is it possible in some of these cases, around the world that there's leading questions and investigators or interviewers are putting this stuff into people's mind? Yeah, it's definitely possible, and that has to be taken into consideration. But when you look at something like the Hampstead case, which has come up in the last couple of years, is anybody familiar with the Hampstead case?
No, never heard of it.
No, what is that?
The Hampstead case is a case that's open now that's taken place in Hampstead, England, and it's happened in the last 2 years where a brother and sister have come out, and again, they say almost the exact same things the kids at Mick Martin said. You can watch all of the interviews of these kids online. I would highly recommend it. There's no doubt in my mind those two kids in the Hampstead, the brother and sister, are telling the truth. It's one of the biggest breaks that we've had in satanic ritual abuse ever. It's gotten the most press, and of course the BBC has put out all these hit pieces on it, saying it's not real and these kids were making up. These kids, I'm telling you, these kids are not making it up. I have not seen any testimonies from kids from Mick Martin, but from what I know, I personally believe that it was it was a true case of satanic ritual abuse. So, and I don't know how much. I can't even remember what Greg said, but this is what I'm saying: is they went back, they hired an archaeologist to find, they found tunnels underneath the school that were filled in, that sort of thing.
So the BBC had a lot of documentaries saying that this was completely not true. That's on the Hampstead case. I don't know if they had a lot of documentaries, but they interviewed the father, who, I would highly recommend anybody look at the interviews, at the Hampstead case, because these two kids, they were interviewed by their mom's boyfriend first, okay? And they never, ever changed their story until they were taken into custody. Okay. Mm-hmm. But then they were interviewed by two professional police interviewers, and you can watch the whole thing. Okay. And the kids give details about being taken to the principal's house
And the interviewers were kind of tricky when they asked them questions. And they said, when you went into the principal's house, what did you see when you went in? And they said, I saw a stand there, and this is what was on it, you know. And, I mean, these kids, the teachers were all involved, and they give specific details, so many details about tattoos that were on the genitalia of all these teachers and stuff. And, that is the biggest break that we've had. And the BBC has put out some hit pieces on it.
Interesting.
Do you have any opinion on the West Memphis 3?
The West Memphis 3, I followed that case for a very long time. And let me say this. I do not know what happened. Dale Griffiths is a friend of mine. Yeah. And obviously he was going to be in the movie, but I cut him out just because.
He is in the special features, though, I believe.
He is in the special features. He just didn't what he was saying didn't really go with the flow of the film. And I had to make some cuts, and I just didn't feel like I could. He said some really relevant things, but just to kind of pop him in there, it just didn't fit without having him in there more and introduce him. And I didn't want to make the film any longer. So we decided to cut Dale. But Dale was the expert witness in that trial. And he's given us a lot of information. And there's one thing I wish I could tell you, but I can't. I'll tell you privately. But about what the prosecutors tried to get him to do. But Dale believes that he was contacted months before this happened about stuff going on in that area. So Dale's convinced that these kids were doing this. And that Damien and Jason and is it Michael? No. Who's it? Jason.
Yeah, Jesse Kelly. Yeah,
and Jesse. He's convinced they were guilty. I personally never was convinced that they were guilty. Okay,
sure.
That's my personal take on it. But I will. This is my take on it now. I believe that. And I'm not saying I'm right about that either, okay? Because I read the book, I've watched the movies, I've scoured over what I know of the evidence, but there's other people like the name William
Ramsey.
William Ramsey, who wrote a book on it, who's investigated a lot more than I have. But anyway, I'm not saying I'm right about that. I've always felt that they were innocent, but this is what I know is the stuff that Damien is into now, personally, I think is dangerous. And he's into some dark stuff now. And, I don't know. Again, I haven't read William Ramsey's book. I might change my mind. And I have nothing against him or, his research. I don't. But again, I read the book, thick book on it. The Web. I forget what it's called. Devil's Knot.
Devil's Knot. Yeah.
But again, that's just one side of the story.
Sure.
So there was just a lot of things that just didn't add up. I'm like, man. And the first time I saw the movie, I was like, I saw it the year it came out, and I just have a feeling. I'm like, man, it just doesn't seem like this was right. But also, I think this case. The problem with it is, in a way, in the public's eyes, these guys were exonerated. So if they're guilty or not, it almost doesn't matter. It does matter, but I mean, they'll get their justice with God. But I don't really go after that case because in the public's eyes, they've been exonerated, even though they admitted guilt, which I think is a very good point. To get out, I don't know what I would do. I know he was on death row. So it's, I mean, the whole thing is a mess, and God knows the truth ultimately. So, and what Damien is into now, in my opinion, is dark and dangerous.
Yeah, it can be a very muddy case for sure. Absolutely. I want to look into the nature of the people involved, because we talk about, and in the West Memphis 3 case, I mean, look, They were 3 kids. They were kind of outcasts. They were kind of different from everybody else. So you could really make a case that they were singled out because of that. But if you look at you interview a lady that is a pastor's wife. I don't remember her name, but she talked about when she went to this community, I think it was in Ohio even, that she had that people that were in the upper echelon of society were actually involved in these cult-like activities. Let's talk to that for a little bit, because this was fascinating.
You're talking about Debbie. Her story was so incredible to me, and her story, even though she wasn't directly involved, it just blew me away. And here's a lady; she has nothing to gain by telling me, to making this up. She was very honest. Her husband and her husband was a pastor. They showed up at this town. They got an assignment of a new church. They're going to go there and have church and praise God and see people saved and lives changed. And they go there and they, long story short, they find out they didn't know anything about this kind of thing. They find out there's a satanic coven running this town, and it's infiltrated the courts, the hospital, the doctors, law enforcement. And I mean, she tells the story. I got so angry when she was telling the story, just hearing the arrogance of this police officer that walked in her back door and backed her up against her counter and just pretty much threatened her. And they had plans to kill these people. They were trying to run them out of town. It was just crazy. And what happened in her case, and this, we hear this a lot, is their church was doing so good and powerful things were happening. So they'll send in an infiltrator to try and bring him down, to try and bring the pastor down, to try and make him have an affair, to just try and do any kind of rituals in the church just to cause, chaos behind the scenes, so to speak. But when your church is powerful and when you're filled with the Holy Spirit, what happens is it breaks down their program. And then they begin to reveal things about the coven. And that's what happened in this case. And it was actually the chief of police wife that was sent in to do all this and to cause these problems. And she began to reveal things about the cult. And man, I cannot remember how much of Debbie's story I put in the extra. There
was quite a bit of it, I think.
Was there? Okay.
Yeah.
Because she tells the story about how they called a town meeting about this satanic cult because her husband and herself were exposing this. So they called a town meeting, and she shows up at this meeting, and she said, every single person here is who the chief of police wife's named. He's like, and she stood up in that meeting, she said, and they tried to turn the tables and say that she and her husband were running the satanic cult. And they were going to get witnesses to say that they were sexually abusing, them, that Debbie and her husband were doing satanic rituals in their living room. And they were trying to say that they were doing everything that the cult was doing. So it's a crazy, crazy story. And that changed her life forever. And when she found out I was making this movie, I didn't even know her. But she said, good, I hope you make this movie. This stuff is true. And I was like, really? How do you know? And then she told me a little bit. And then I said, tell me more. And then she told me more. And I said, hey, I want you to be in the film. And she was willing.
I think there's an important distinction to be made here when we talk about this, because in her case, and also I think that Michael Lake and his wife, I heard them on an interview from A View from the Bunker, and she talked about how she had similar things that were happening in Missouri. And so, we're not dealing with some punk kids that listen to a few black metal albums and go sacrifice cats in the middle of the night. We're not dealing with something like the kids that are in the West Memphis 3, or we're not dealing with somebody that's like normal mom and pop, everyday average Joe that works at the gas station or, something like that. We're dealing with people that are in the upper echelons of society, police chiefs, mayors, that level, and that's pretty scary.
Yeah, and she said the same thing. There was another pastor named Noel in the film. He gave the same testimony with his experience and the girl that he dealt with. And, again, she specified, she said, yeah, are there kids that, that dress in black and into metal, are they involved? Yeah, but at the lower levels, they'll use those guys to recruit, just like in Guy's case, he was involved in drugs. So, they, the drug dealers, they were using those guys. They were lower level, and they, I believe they wanted to somehow indoctrinate or kind of bring Guy into the cult. I don't know why they let him live, after that night or whatever. I don't know what the point of that was, but they have pawns, they have people, and it's hard to wrap your head around this because we, just the idea that this is happening behind the scenes. So I don't know. I made the movie, and it's difficult for me to believe, but I do believe it.
Yeah. Rob, was there anything that you wanted to ask since you've seen the film?
Yeah. One thing that kind of struck me after finishing it was there's a lot of, obviously a lot of real awful things are, discussed as having gone on. And it's particularly in Guy's case, there's no real mention of any like criminal investigation into any of this stuff. Was there a side of that to this at all?
Sorry, I'm eating a piece of ice. Not that I'm aware of. So I'm trying to think of a specific case that's in the film where there was any kind of law enforcement involved.
Well, like with his story, what struck me was that he talked about how, he witnessed these horrible things, 2 children being sacrificed and him being covered in blood and carrying this guilt around. And finally he came to where he could talk about it. But did he ever go to police or was there?
Okay. Yeah. Now I remember. He was actually arrested that night because he broke into the church van.
Right.
And he was happy to be arrested because he felt safe. And he was babbling about kids being killed or whatever. And when I was in Oregon, we tried to track down that arresting police officer, but we couldn't get him that day. We called him, we got his number, we went to the police station and couldn't get him. But apparently he went back to that apartment and he asked some questions. He's like, okay, what'd you do to that guy? Because he was messed up. He was talking about kids, naked kids, something like that. I don't know. I don't remember the specifics of what Guy said, but that police officer did go back to that apartment and ask them what happened. And I don't know what they said, but I'm assuming they denied it. And that was the end of the investigation.
So they just chalked up to his drug use or something?
Yeah, sure. Which, is understandable. And I even asked Guy that. I said, okay, so what are you going to say to people that say you were on drugs, you hallucinated this? He said, I've done all kinds of drugs. I've done all kinds of drugs. And he said, I've never had this experience before. He said, I remember this, and I know the details. And again, if you watch the extra scenes and the deleted parts of the interview, I ask him even more detail. And when you watch him answer those questions, he's not making it up on the spot. He's given the best he can to his recollection. So,
Well, Tom, it has been fascinating, and I think we've barely scratched the surface of what's in the video, and that's good. So tell everyone that where they can get it, how they can see it, and what's next for you.
Well, if you go to the website, detestablefilm.com, you can buy a copy of the film there, and you'll see 2 options. You buy just the movie and for $20, or for an extra $5, you can get the over 2 hours of deleted scenes. We'll send that DVD too, and you can get that whole package there. We have it in a nice digipack. A lot of people have complimented us on the packaging and the artwork. We put a lot into it. But also, if you're not in the U.S. and you don't want to order a DVD, you can go to Vimeo and you can rent it for 72 hours for $6. And that works really good for people who are overseas. And you can also buy it digitally on Vimeo if you want. And it's lifetime streaming. So
Excellent. And what do you work? I know you're working on anything next?
I am in the very beginning stages of making plans for the next project. We're not really ready to announce it yet, but I'm excited about it. I'm praying about it. This project, making this film Detestable, just took a lot out of my life, and my family sacrificed a lot for me to make this film. And I'm just really kind of easing my way back into it because I know what it takes. We put our heart and soul into this thing, and I am preparing for something, but we're not 100% sure, what direction we're going to go. But excited, hopefully, in the next month to make an announcement on that.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Tom. And I think we're going to close this section out. Guys, we will be back as usual on Conspirinormal.
All right, and we're back. So in the show, we like to have guests with lots of different varying viewpoints. And this is one that kind of drifts a little bit further away from where I stand, especially philosophically. I don't tend to see the world as like a good versus evil kind of a thing. For me, it's all right and wrong. Morality is derived from something more personal.
Yeah.
But with all that aside, there was, some interesting cases and definitely some very, very dark stuff.
Yeah. And before I kind of get Luke's impression, and Jeff left to go to Home Depot.
Yeah, he had some home improvements that were
apparently
very, very urgent on a Sunday night at 9 o'clock.
But I lent you the video.
Yeah.
I think did you watch the special features too, or did you just watch
just the main DVD?
Just the main DVD. So I kind of want to get your thoughts on the film, and then what you just heard.
Well, it's tough. Like I said, the film was done well. I definitely recommend that if you're interested in this at all to buy it and watch it. But for me, it was a little bit too. Being not a Christian, it was it was a little preachy and a little bit sort of. It felt kind of like, sort of like fear propaganda to me. If you go out and do this or this or this, you're going to fall in the hands of Satan, and then you're going to be doomed. And I grew up with that kind of a setting, so like it's not coming out of nowhere for me, but it was hard for me to kind of look past that at times.
Mm-hmm. What did you think about some of the, apart from that, some of the testimony, some of the accounts?
They definitely come off as very genuine and heartfelt, and I'm not trying to discount that this kind of thing happens, because I'm sure that it does. I just personally don't believe that there's like a mastermind Satan behind it all. That it's just human beings doing horrible things because human beings are capable of horrible things.
Yeah. Certainly you could take it from that angle, and you could say that this is either a form of mind control or just what you just said, just horrible things done to innocent people.
Right.
You could definitely take it from that angle. Despite what it's evil, no matter what the nature of that evil or the source of that evil would be, necessarily if it's humans doing it or if it's Satan doing it.
Right, it's wrong.
It would be wrong regardless. Luke, you were listening.
Yeah.
Of course he was.
What are you trying to say?
I just, I mean, you were there when we interviewed Russ Dizdar the first time.
Yeah.
Which was back in March or February of 2013. And actually, we lost that show because I hadn't updated Power Gramo and it didn't record. So all it recorded was just our.
I tried to get you to do things the illegal way. You wouldn't listen to me.
Well, yeah, But anyway, so you heard that interview. Now you hear this, and I just want to get your opinion on some of this stuff.
Well, I mean, you know, I don't like to speak out, and I admire Jeff for what he did, kind of, counteracting.
Well, I think he asked a good question, and he asked a valid question.
Yeah, he did phrase it appropriately and everything.
Right.
I'm over here thinking all I could think is, back before I settled down a little bit, and back before I was in a relationship, I was like, man, I'd do whatever it takes to experience some kind of phenomena. Yeah, come take over me, man. Come possess me. I'm ready. Let's do this. Because other than the little things here and there, they're just weird circumstances or whatever. I never experienced any kind of phenomena or whatever.
But how does that fit into the veracity of these claims about the satanic ritual?
Because what I'm trying to say is that they're just it's just hard for me to believe.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many details attached. It's hard for me to believe because as someone that doesn't really get to experience anything.
Yeah,
and like I was saying to Rob, I believe that someone would have to open themselves purposely to get possessed by a demon. I think that they would actually have to go through these steps to open themselves to the level that they could possibly be possessed by a demon. Like an occult sort of practice.
Yeah. And definitely that's what what's being described there.
Yeah.
Is some kind of occult practice.
I mean, do I think it happens? Yes.
Yeah.
Is it common? No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Well, and the DVD focuses more on sort of the premise that there's this vast underground network of Satanists working hand in hand globally, which we didn't really address a whole lot in the interview, but which is an interesting concept in itself. I can see the fact that there's all these similarities between these different cases that he's come across, and there's no real other basis or foundation for those similarities to exist. But again, I don't know if that's enough for me to believe it. But.
Well, I'll tell you where I come from on this. I mean, not too long ago, maybe when I first started doing the show, I don't know how much of I could say that I was a firm believer that this stuff was going on or whether I really thought about it critically. Definitely growing up in the 90s, and I remember in the late 80s, this stuff, the whole satanic panic thing happening. And we addressed this a little bit when we, after the Mark Devlin show. And, Jeff could have spoken to this as well about how, that was a big thing at that time. You're a little younger than me, and Rob and Luke's about 11 years younger than me.
I'm several hundred years old.
Yeah. Anyway, but so you may not remember it as well as I remember it. But I had heard about the Satanic Panic, about how it was mass hysteria, how it was this, how it was that. I never really paid any attention to it until I started looking into some of the things around about, I'd say 2007, 2008. Some of the things about Russ Dizdar, what he was talking about, whether any of this stuff was true. And I'm still very much 50-50 on it. I'm halfway to no and I'm halfway to yes. And when I looked into cases like the McMartin preschool case, I heard Russ Dizdar on Coast to Coast, and I heard someone directly challenge him, one of the callers, about the McMartin preschool case. I had never really heard about the case before. And I did some study about it. And there's actually a good movie that HBO did in the 90s with James Wood. It's called, I can't remember the name of it, but it's an HBO movie. And as he described there, talk about the kids and the claims that they made and the supposed tunnels that were underneath the preschool. There were some weird claims that were, yes, the kids did claim that they were part of these satanic ritual abuses, that they were being taken underneath the school and they were being messed with and all this. They also claimed that Chuck Norris was part of it. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of other weirdness about it. And when they looked at the reason that the McMartin preschool case started, now this is everything that I have studied about it. The reason that it started was you had a mother that was later proven to be schizophrenic, proven to have a mental issue. And she had all these claims about her ex-husband doing stuff to her son. It was either a son or a daughter. I don't remember. But she had all these claims about it. And all of a sudden she began to accuse. She was also a drug addict, by the way. And she began to accuse the McMartin family of doing things to her kids. None of it was later ever proven to be true. But a lot of the parents believed it because kids started coming up with these stories. And when they finally looked at it, it was one of the psychologists or the psychiatrists, whichever, that was talking to the kids. And a lot of it was on the kind of this idea of the power of suggestion. Like whatever the psychologist would suggest, the kids would come up with.
Right. And I always wonder about that when children are involved.
Well, because children are creative naturally, and they will come up with weird stuff.
Well, and we teach them from an early age to listen to adults, and they learn from an early age that agreeing is usually the best policy. And
another thing that I forgot to mention, too, that I was trying to think of was, I'm like a heavy believer in astrological traits assigned to people, in numerology and like fine mathematics, like applied to your birth date and stuff like that, and the and correlation with the celestial body. So, I think that people born on certain days and certain times are more susceptible to paranormal things happening to them, and that's another big thing for me in my little universe that's going on in my head.
Yeah, okay, could be. I also find just to kind of conclude the McMartin case, it went to trial for years, and it went nowhere. Eventually, everyone was acquitted. Everybody, they were not found guilty. It lasted from 1984 to 1990. Now, to go back to what you just said, Luke, I do find some things interesting about in a connection between some of this satanic ritual abuse stories and some of the alien abduction stories. One of which is that there is a claim by some of these satanic ritual abuse survivors, especially women, that say that they were that they would be impregnated by somebody in the coven, and they would have these babies, which were later used for ritualistic sacrifice.
Right.
Compare that to the women that claim that they are taken on board craft by aliens and put an alien human hybrid in their bellies, and then the alien human hybrids are later re-abducted and taken, and then they never see the children again. There's a very similar aspect to it.
And I haven't looked into enough of these cases to know if there's any documented, this lady was pregnant up until third trimester and then suddenly she wasn't. I don't know if there's a lot of cases out there like that or not. But to me, that speaks to some sort of psychological need on the woman's part herself. Like, I mean...
Yeah, there's something very psychological about that.
Yeah.
For sure. We can say something, Luke?
I mean, that the New Age community seems to think that there's like aliens traversing among us right now, and they're disguising themselves, and the whole inner Earth theory with cities beneath the Earth and everything else. But
David Jacobs believes that. He believes there's aliens among us.
I'm with you. I mean, I'm with you on the alien abduction is too close to, things that happen in the mind. Mm-hmm. It's too closely related.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do believe that we're dealing with a spiritual element. We're dealing with something that is outside of ourselves. But however, it chooses to manifest itself. Another interesting aspect of it is that with that is similar to the alien abduction stuff is the use of hypnosis. A lot of people have retrieved these memories, these satanic ritual abuse memories, from being hypnotized. And then, with that also goes into people having these alien abduction experiences. So are we dealing with something that is real? Is it a hypnotic suggestion? Or is it a possibility that the hypnosis is causing an altered state of consciousness where people believe that these things happen to them?
Or it could be some reflection of some deep subconscious, either fear or something that just bubbles to the surface.
And assuming that everyone shares a mass consciousness, like then it's really likely that you would pick up on something that is kind of floating out there in the ether.
Right. Trends and yeah.
Now I will say this. Now I'm gonna say this for the rest of the cons part of why I'm 50-50 on this. The FBI found out after all these claims for all these years through the 80s into the early to mid 90s, they looked into it and they found nothing. There was never any mass graves where they were supposed to be. They said that these things never happened. Now, someone will easily say, and especially in this very conspiracy-oriented culture that we had, well, the FBI was obviously trying to cover up. And if there are people that are high up and they are Satanists, they would try to cover it up. Okay. So, and then also too, people that were in California that were, this was apart from the McMartin case where they were all accused of satanic ritual abuse. People's lives were ruined by this. These were just normal run of the mill working class people. So that happened. Now, pro side. I can't discount it completely because you have events like the Dutroux affair in Belgium. Dutroux was a Belgian criminal who later came out and said, and this was also this is in court documents from Belgium, that there was that there were some serious child pedophile sex rings that were going on in Belgium. Stuff that even went up so far as to like the prime minister and the royal family of Belgium. In fact, if you read some of the Dutroux affair stuff, there is some nasty stuff that borders on a lot of what Tom described. Secondly, you have the Franklin cover-up. Franklin cover-up was about this. I believe it was like Franklin. God, I have to look into it. I'd love to get the guy. There's a guy I'd love to get on about that wrote a book about this. But this took place in Omaha, Nebraska, and a lot of people say that this was false accusations. But there's been other court cases that have upheld this and said that this was real stuff. That there was a guy that was ahead. He was using boys from Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska, which was this huge charity for orphan kids, and they were using them. These were all male child prostitutes that were being funneled even as far away as Washington, D.C. Okay. That's the Franklin cover-up. There was the Discovery documentary that was made about this, but you can find it online, that was never aired. Discovery was forced to pull it at the last minute in the mid-'90s. But you can see it. It is on YouTube.
I know what you're talking about.
You've watched it.
Yeah.
So that has links to stuff like the Johnny Gosch case, which there's a film called the Who Took Johnny Gosch, who was a kid that in the early 80s that disappeared from West Des Moines, Iowa, which is not far from about 100 miles or so drive from Omaha, Nebraska. There's links to that case and to the Franklin cover-up. Thirdly is something called the Finders case, which Luke is familiar with, but we've never talked about on this show. Finders case was a case where there were these children that showed up somewhere in Florida that were living in a van with these two other adults.
Always Florida.
And they were and they were wearing tattered clothes, and they were dirty. And they later found that the investigators later found where these children were coming from, and they found a whole bunch of other children that were being raised by some kind of weird cult. Now, this cult had connections to the CIA and to other intelligence agencies.
That's crazy.
Yes, and they had links in Washington, D.C. as well. Look at Sandusky, Penn State. Why was that guy able to get? Why was he able to get away with what he got away with for so long? When they say, well, was he that good of a football coach that he was able to? They were able to cover for his ass and basically ruin that coach's long, illustrious career. When he was caught 10 years before raping a 10-year-old boy in the shower. What were the connections with there? It seems like there was a lot more going on with that case than a lot of people know about. And finally, what we talked about before, Jimmy Savile, the pedo bear in we talked about that with Mark Devlin extensively. So you have all those cases, and you have links with intelligence agencies, and you have links with a lot of occultic secret societies. So to totally say that the satanic ritual abuse stuff is all crap, I cannot say because of the existence of all these other examples that I know about.
Right, and I totally agree with you on that point. I just don't know how grand a scale it is, and I still don't think that it comes down to an ultimate battle between good and evil. I think it's just more people with power abusing their power and helping each other cover it up to do things that are wrong.
You're so good at making points.
That was very well enumerated.
I would, personally, I agree with Tom on some of the things that he says about the Antichrist. I have my own thoughts on that. I have my own thoughts about the nature of Satan, who he is or who it is. I would agree with most of biblical prophecy. I don't get into it because I think a lot of it has been misused, especially by our especially by political parties on the right wing. Were you going to say something, Luke?
Silence. I don't remember.
Well, trying to think of where I was trying to go there when I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Real quick. Have you heard these rumors about some kind of island that that's been discovered recently with a bunch of like preteen prostitutes on it or something like that?
No.
I hadn't looked into it yet, but I've been my buddy that's really into politics, Squashy, said that there's been some talk on some like political talk radio shows about some kind of island with a bunch of like Asian, preteen prostitutes that a lot of our like politicians are flying over in their private jets and like going to this island and having like a week of paradise or whatever, and then coming back home. And
it wouldn't surprise me, because one of the things they talk about in the book in the film was he talks a little bit in the special features. Actually, they talk a little bit about Bohemian Grove, and Bohemian Grove has been notorious for running in prostitutes, male and female. And there's been speculation that they've been running in children as well.
Well, now that it's gotten all this attention, I'm sure they shut it down and relocated somewhere else.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. I want to talk about... This is kind of an interesting follow-up, if you got the clip ready, Rob. Remember back in the summer, we talked about this woman that attacked. She was dressed in Muslim garb, and she attacked these people flying an American flag and tried to take it off of them and attacked them.
Like come running out of the woods.
She came running out of the woods. Yeah, this was in Lawrenceville, Georgia, where a very good friend of mine lives, and also I think we're close. Joshua Cutchin lives close to there as well, and so they were actually interviewed by NPR just a few days ago, and this is why they're voting for Trump. And I want to play this clip. It's about 4 minutes long.
The Arnos see a country in trouble, and they told us a personal story to illustrate why. They say that last May, a woman in conservative Muslim dress seized their American flag off the mailbox and attacked Damie. The Arno's son pulled a gun before the woman was subdued. No shots were fired. Police arrested the woman, and authorities did not say her motive or mental state. But for this family, the incident, which made the local news, symbolized divisions in their ever more diverse county and country.
I want grandchildren, but the way this country is right now, I don't want to do that to these children. Think about what it's going to be like in 18 years if a child is born right now. On its 18th birthday, what is this country going to look like if it continues the way it is? And that's what scares me.
Help people understand what is going that wrong, because we're sitting here in the richest country in the history of the planet.
Well, let's see. If you go to a movie theater, you're liable to get shot. If you go to a mall, you're liable to get shot.
Statistically, crime rates are near historic lows, but at a time of high-profile violence, the Arnos are feeling different.
If you go to Atlanta or to a major city, you're liable to be shot or attacked.
What about just going to the local high school right here? We actually had a BLM protest at two of our high schools right here in county. My son's was one.
BLM, Black Lives Matter, is that right?
Yes.
And it was over Black Lives Matter and Confederate flags.
Some people still fly the Confederate flag around here. The Arnos say they used to fly one too. Then they discovered it made some of their teenage daughter's friends uncomfortable, so they took it down out of courtesy. They kept the framed full-length photograph of General Robert E. Lee, which hung over the living room couch as we talked. Jimmy Arno ties racial tensions to President Obama.
I know that we were a whole lot further along racially 8 years ago than we are today.
You think so?
Yes, sir. I really do.
And the Arnos are planning to vote this fall for Donald Trump for president. Jimmy sees Hillary Clinton as just more years of Obama. He admires Trump's business career and dismisses news stories of Trump cheating contractors and ordinary people.
Hillary wants to be elected and Donald Trump wants to be elected. They're going to talk bad about everything that they can about the other candidate so that you vote for him.
You just discount the whole thing.
I discount the whole thing because I want to know what your plan is to help the country. That's what I want to know.
What do you think Donald Trump's plan is?
Donald Trump, if I understand him correctly, and I hope I do, he wants to stop the flow of illegal people in this country. Stop the flow. Well, by stopping the flow, more Americans have an opportunity to go to work because they're not losing their jobs to illegal immigrants.
Now, this is a much debated point, with many studies finding people in the country illegally do not tend to take native workers' jobs. But for Jimmy Arno, the concern about immigration matches his broader concerns about the direction of the country. He's worried enough that on the day we met, he was thinking about whether or not to join a local group.
It's a militia group. And should martial law, civil war, whatever break out in this country, they will uphold the Constitution and rebuild our laws.
What war do you mean?
The war that's going to take place when Hillary Clinton's elected, if that happens.
What sort of a war would that be?
Your patriots are going to overthrow the government.
Now, to be clear, the Arnos say they have no plans whatever to start a war, but if some kind of chaos should ever come, they mean for their family to be ready.
Okay. So there was a little bit that I edited out of that. That's like a long, it was like 6 minutes long from NPR. They're doing this whole series about divided states, and they went to Georgia because that is one of the states that could go either way, they're thinking. It's not necessarily a battleground state. More likely it'll go for Trump. Just our state's definitely going to go for Trump, but so they were doing that series, and it's interesting that they picked the same people that got attacked by the woman and the Muslim woman. So I guess that lends credence, because at the time I thought I was really leery about that story, not knowing if it was real or not. But I guess now, I guess it was definitely real. So I find it interesting because today, or like over the weekend, this is October 16th. They were recording this, Trump has already come out and said that, if he loses the election, that means it's rigged. So we have people out there now that are we going to have people that are just normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill people? Sure, maybe they're a little right-wing in their politics, maybe they're a little more conservative, but are they going to get really politically active, and are they going to get, almost like violent, according to that, to what the guy said when he started talking about patriots taking the country back?
Well, first of all, I don't know where to begin picking that audio clip apart.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's going to get violent. I think that the election is going to happen, and everyone's going to be disappointed, and 4 years from now, whoever is in office, we're all going to be complaining about them together. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal.
You think it's rhetoric?
Well, I've never been attacked by a Muslim in my backyard, but I'd like to think if I had been, I would blame that Muslim, not every immigrant in this country.
Yeah. Well, I think we said it on that show that it seemed like those people, when that happened, that they very much seemed like very high strung, like they almost seemed like they were preparing for something like that to happen, and then bizarrely it actually did, and that's why the woman that attacked them almost got killed by the son when he pulled out a gun on him, and so it was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy,
right? And how could something like that just randomly happen? I don't think that there's part of the story that we do not know. And I think that's what I said the last time too. Like they've been feuding or something.
Yeah, if they were against Muslims and somebody in the town and one of the Muslims in the town knew about it and got pissed off, who knows? I mean, we don't know. But Luke, you were listening to that. What did you think about it? Are you hearing this kind of stuff out and about?
Of course, I back him, except for his support for Trump. Like everything else he said, yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a perception out there of people that, especially white, middle-class people, that feel like they are losing control and they are losing power and they are losing their hold on everything that they've held dear. And a lot of them are out there feeling that Trump gives them some kind of hope. And when people begin to lose hope like that, you begin to have a situation where they're going to embrace more extremist views and more extremist politics. And eventually they will, not saying that these people will specifically, but somebody will. You know, just over the weekend, just a few days ago, the FBI caught these guys in Kansas that were, their plan was to bomb a bunch of Somalis in like an apartment complex. And they had this plan to place all these bombs around it so they could kill as many people as possible, including children, by the way. And these guys were serious. Of course, they were pretty much entrapped by the FBI because one of the guys that their contact that was giving them the weapons to do it was the FBI guy. So this is the same old story again, except they're not doing it against Muslims. They're doing it with quote unquote Christians now. And apparently these guys called themselves the Crusaders. So I think when this rhetoric is out there, you know, it's not just going to be Muslims anymore. It's going to be also people that are against them, and they're going to start doing this. They're going to start doing the exact same thing that the Muslims are that Muslims are doing. It really worries me. It's just like, you know, you can really make a case that people in the Islamic world, that a lot of these people feel like they have no hope. And, you know, there's some other things that we've explored with Dr. Furnish that, you know, shows that some things in the religion itself lend to this. But when you have someone that has no hope and has no means, they do go to extremist views. So what's going to keep somebody like these people that we just listened to, what's going to keep them from feeling like they have nothing else left? Or what's going to happen if their children feel that they have nothing else left in a society that all of a sudden they live worse than their parents? Are they going to lash out? Are they going to be the ones to become a new breed of extremist terrorists? I don't know. It's you know, people losing power and wanting to keep it. It can be a dangerous game sometimes.
One of the things that he said that rang most true with me, that it's like unrelated though, is that there were no race issues a few years ago. I mean, like they were kind of all created if you think about it.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. That was the one thing that he said, that things have definitely gotten a lot worse over the past 5 years or so.
Yeah, and at the same time, though, you know, I said in the earlier show about this lady that was saying that before Obama there was no racial strife. Well, I mean, I don't think that that's a true statement.
Right.
But I do think that... And
I can't directly pin anything on Obama either. I can't think of a single correlation.
Well, I can think of one thing Obama said that I think pretty much started this, where he did not remain impartial as he should have remained impartial. And let me say this, I don't think if Donald Trump was president, he'd be any better, because Trump just says stupid shit. But anyway, you know, the one thing that I can think of was when the whole Trayvon Martin thing came out. I think Obama should have just left that alone, not spoken about it. I mean, the police shootings, that's a little different, because these are government officials, not necessarily federal government, but government officials. And he does have to answer a little bit to that. But with the Trayvon Martin shooting, that was not a government official. That was this wannabe asshole wannabe cop asshole. Let me put it this way, that killed that kid. And Obama comes out and says, well, that could have been my son.
But that
was the beginning of this perception about Obama that in my mind. And when he left his impartiality at the door, as he should have done as president, that was the point where a lot of people said, oh, Obama is just going to support blacks over whites. And a lot of people began to have that perception. Whether Obama meant that or not, I don't know, but that was the perception. So,
gun control agenda.
well, yeah, I mean, that would be part of it too. But, look, I do agree in some ways because, when we elected him, and I voted for him in 2008, I'll admit that. When we elected him, it was a big moment. First black president. We're past this racial divide. But somehow, even though our president is black, even though people in his administration are black, even though we should live in this colorblind society that has been created, that should have been created since the 1960s, from King all the way to Obama, and then all of a sudden, but we have more racial strife now than we had before. And it's like, what happened? I don't know if there's an easy answer to what happened. And I don't know if you could necessarily blame Obama himself.
Well, I think a part of it, well, let's go back to the clip. The guy said something over and over and over again, and the NPR guy kept disputing it, but it was, statistically, you're more likely to get shot in a theater, and statistically, you're more likely to get shot in a mall. Statistically, you're not. Crime rates are not any worse than they have ever been, ever.
Right.
They're not.
Once again, because everyone's more docile.
There's that, but media has changed in the past 4 or 5 years, and we have not caught up with it. We have not recognized it. Social media, Twitter, Facebook, this instant communication, instant viral, everything is so different from how life was 8 years ago that everything seems more dramatic. Everything seems more intense. Everything is happening now. Like, you get all these reports about crimes and you get people fired up about it. And that couldn't happen 10 years ago when we'd watch a news story and then the next day at the water cooler, you'd talk to 2 people and then the next day they'd talk to 4 people. And that's how it used to spread. Now it's instantly. You got thousands of people seeing everything that happens all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the violence as it is with racism, as it is with politics. I mean, look at this political debate. The worst situation we've ever had between 2 candidates. Nobody seems to like either of them, and we've gotten to this situation for the same reason. All this stuff was spewed on social media. Everybody made up their mind off of facts that aren't even facts, and we've just all run with it. Right.
And I've listened to a history podcast, and one podcast that I've listened to, Revolutions, in the section about the French Revolution, he talks again and again about how so many of the mob actions that happened in the French Revolution were because of these rumors that would just spread like wildfire, whether they were true or not. And you see in the same kind of effect now, but except it's virtual. It's what you just described. People are getting information that is either right information or wrong information, but it's all being filtered through Facebook. I mean, look at the Phantom Clown phenomenon. I mean, look at the Phantom. Compare that to what happened in the 80s with the Phantom Clown phenomenon, where you had maybe Lauren Coleman or a couple other guys writing about it. Compare that to now, where it's all of a sudden exploded, and social media has been a tool that has allowed that to happen, to where you have these idiots dressing up like clowns now. I mean, that's just one aspect of it.
A whole new world.
It sure is. Well, I think if there's anything else to add, we're going to call it. So I hope everybody enjoyed their Halloween. And, hopefully the Russians don't attack and everything will be okay.
Hopefully you're actually hearing this podcast. And that means we're all still alive.
Hopefully we're not in a radioactive wasteland. Luke dressed up like Mad Max. So,
dude. I'd be the guy at the helm playing the guitar.
Yeah, you'd be the guy.
I'm down
on the crazy bungee thing.
Hopefully I'll get some radioactive slime on me and I'll become like a badass. The best case scenario.
4 arms, so you play 12 string and 6 string.
Next time we have our 2016 election special. And we are going to have on an interview with a Trump supporter, someone that's a diehard Trump supporter. We're going to find out why he likes Trump. And we're going to have Scotty Roberts back and Rocky Stucci back on the show.
Did you go to
your favorite Rocky Stucci?
Rocky Stucci. He's gonna bring the meatballs.
And by the way, guys, we do have a website, www.conspirinormal.com. Please check it out. And Luke, take us out.
You might have to pause there.
And on that note, everybody, thank you for listening to
Conspirinormal.